First of all, thank you so much, Bishop Mike and Mr. Dean, for the invitation to preach at this service. I should say I say both because the attitude of deans and bishops to cathedrals, don't say to them, I said this, but very striking. So the safest thing, if you don't want arsenic in your soup later, is to thank both of you. I'm very, very grateful to be here and to be with you, and also just looking around, an amazing amount of work has been done at this cathedral. This may be what we do every Sunday, I'm sure it is, but I have to say, this pulpit, I hardly dare move in case I been beautifully done, thank you so much. Now, I'm going to get this story slightly wrong and be corrected afterwards, but it is a true story, so the facts match up. Yes, my wife's just caught my eye. When I was a curate in Nuneaton, we were, Caroline, I think it was just before Christmas, was down and getting a new battery for a watch or something like that in a jeweller's, and she was waiting to get the battery. She was doing the person in front was being dealt with, and they wanted to buy a cross for someone. And the person behind the counter said, they said, we've got two sorts of cross. We've got a plain one, we've got one with a little band on it. I think she missed the point. The point is exactly the reverse. For the first 3 or more centuries of Christian history, the cross was the reason people attacked Christianity. The insane scandal of the cross was seen as the most justifiable reason for dismissing Christian faith as absolute rubbish. Why? Because you only crucified really bad people. They were the ones who went to the cross, and the idea that you could have a faith that was based around a figure that had been crucified was clearly insane. And so, when pagans wrote about why Christianity was rubbish, they started, of course, with the cross. It was scandal. And yet, today, it is the object that is probably more at the heart of more art, of more architecture, of more of the way we think of something, of things, of the world around us, than any other symbol. Not only in our own countries, in the ancient Christian traditions, but across the whole world. If you want to say you've been particularly badly treated, you talk about being crucified. It is the centre of the way we look at things. This very cathedral, of course, is built in the shape of a cross. The bishops here are wearing a cross, each of us. And in a rather bizarre bit of symbolism, the primatial cross, of course, for an archbishop is not a cross, it's a double cross. It's always worth remembering that when you're dealing with archbishops. I won't mention, of course, that the symbol of a bishop is a crook. But what is it about the cross that inspires us to call this day holy? Why is it the object that so captivates us, that so catches us? What is it about it that means Christians engrave it, paint it, sculpt it in their homes, in their churches, even on their bodies? What is it about this power, about the power of this emblem, that means that athletes, soldiers, priests, explorers, singers sign themselves with the cross before any moment of great endurance or fear? And why is this day, and indeed every day, very different because of those two pieces of wood, which were hastily but securely fixed together. The readings we've heard in this wonderful service have a seam of gold running through them, which shine light on our path as we seek to answer this question. Each of them has, as their central theme, the cross of Jesus Christ. That is no surprise, for this cross is at the centre of all things in heaven and on earth. And rightly so, because as Luther said, the cross of Christ tests everything. You might be surprised to hear me say that the cross is at the centre of all our readings. In the first reading in the book of Numbers, there was only a bronze serpent set up in the midst of the wilderness. For those who are struggling to remember which particular moment in that story that was, it's one of the fairly repetitious ones where the people of God are moaning. They whinged, moaned, and wimped their way through 40 years of travelling around the wilderness. That is a short summary of the Pentateuch, but it's more or less accurate. They might have been freed from captivity in Egypt, but the journey to freedom was not as easy as they had hoped. It never is. Bad goes to worse when they get into a plague of vipers, and they're bitten by snakes the whole time. Moses is instructed by God to put a bronze serpent on a pole and lift it high. Anyone who's bitten can look at it and live. And it's seen by Old Testament scholars as one of the oldest parts of the Old Testament, one of the most original parts, and it has often puzzled people. But Jesus talks about it in a different way. It's a symbol of what will happen to him. That the symbol of evil will be turned into the power of good. It is universally agreed that when Jesus talks about the Son of Man, he meant himself. And Jesus is declaring that when he is lifted up from the earth on the cross, like the snake, all who turn to him will believe. And it's been one of the themes of these 3 days in this diocese for me. The group of us who came down here have been fantastically looked after. I know there was some consternation yesterday in Malmesbury, where I baptised or reconfirmed the baptism of 19 people in a pool in full robes in the open air outside Malmesbury Abbey with a large crowd around. And I sort of waded around in this pool for some considerable time, and the microphone had rather complained. I obviously then confirmed them, and I have to say it's one of my quicker confirmations because the air was getting pretty chilly and they were shivering. Of course, I'm immune to such things being an Archbishop. We had a bishop in one diocese, a suffering bishop in one diocese, who was reckoned to take 52 seconds for each confirmation. That would have made about 17 minutes, and I did it rather quicker. And then, of course, I had to go and change. So some poor people who lived near the Abbey found themselves imposed on by a dripping wet Archbishop, which was unusual. And apparently beforehand there was great worries about whether it was a fitting place for an Archbishop to change. Which seems that people worry about what fits me much better than I worry about it myself. But let's see what is fitting for Jesus. He's the one who comes from above, says Philippians, who came because he did not count holding on to what he had as something essential, but he gave it all up. Nothing was fitting except he came and lived a fully human life so that we could be caught up and live a life with God. He came to be like us so that we had the opportunity to become like him. He was extraordinary in his life. He lived the most brilliant of human lives. But that's not the most wonderful thing. He taught the most profound truths as only a true genius can. in the simplest of ways. But that is not the most wonderful thing. The most wonderful thing is that he considered it fitting to be lifted up on a cross. We are living through a time when it seems that daily the darkness deepens, the shadows fall, the weight of human evil seems to grow, and even those who stand up for what is good find themselves assailed on every side. All of us today will have heard this morning of the brutal, cruel murder of David Haynes. He was in the Middle East on humanitarian. He'd gone to serve the people of Syria and Iraq, and his captors captured him, held him, toyed with the hopes of freedom, and then killed him. And so where is Christ on that? On Holy Cross Day, we are reminded above all that he is with David Haynes, that he is in the depths of evil and the depths of our own suffering because of the cross. We will pray for David's family and remember him, but we can remember with hope because of the cross. And there'll be many here today who themselves are going through a cross of sorts, perhaps with relationships in the family, with work or debt, with bereavement or illness or the fear of it. There will be much suffering in this cathedral this morning, most of it unseen. And all that sounds pretty grim, were it not that on Holy Cross Day, our eyes are drawn to the cross. In Coventry Cathedral, where I worked for 5 years and was very involved in conflict management and mitigation, as they say in the trade, reconciliation work, including in the Middle East, including one visit to Iraq just after the invasion, including in the Holy Land, much in Nigeria and other places of profound and deep brutality. In Coventry Cathedral, at the east end, by the high altar of the new cathedral built after the destruction of the Second World War, there is a tapestry 80 foot high, 35 foot wide. Many of you will have seen it. It's a tapestry by Sutherland of Christ in glory. And there is the ascended Christ on his throne. Absolutely, it's a wonderful, wonderful, fine piece of art. Magnificent. When you stand at the back of the cathedral, it was designed by Boston Speck, so that was the only bit of colour you can see. Everything else is grey. And there at the end is this brilliant greens and yellows and golds, and Christ in glory. And at his feet, between his feet, because the figure is 70 foot high, between his feet is a small man. And even Christ in glory, on either side of that human being, has the marks of the cross in his feet, on his hands. I used to sit there before some of the more dangerous trips, in my stall in the cathedral as a canon, and look up at that during evensong and pray when I was really nervous. And I remember my eye always being drawn by that man, and the recognition that wherever I was going, he'd gone, that Jesus had gone further. Whatever the cost might be to me, they had been greater to him, because that man on either side had the marks of the cross. Where is Jesus in the depths of our suffering? He is the God who became wholly human, who stood by our side, who sucked into himself every ounce of sin and suffering and brutality of this world, before, then, and after, in total injustice, absorbed it, held it, overcame it, and rose from the dead, and is alive and with us by his Spirit today in reality and truth. And therefore death is defeated. Despair is overcome. Whatever we feel, wherever we are, however weak we are, afraid we are, depressed we are, you can be overwhelmed by the sorrows of this world. Many are, sadly. Depression assails them, and only darkness seems all around, and yet Jesus remains light, whatever we feel, and loves us, however much we turn away. So this cross is for all of us. It's for David Haynes, for his family. It is the cross of sorrows and grief that says that God loved us enough to come and share every ounce of it with us. Grace upon grace, love to the loveless shown, that they might love you be. And the response he calls us to is to trust this grace and love with our lives. The one who is lifted high on the cross requires more than a glance from us, more than a quick squint or look. He calls us to believe and trust, to take this love for us as the most certain thing in our lives, to become those who take up our cross and follow him, who consider it fitting for us, not to live life for ourselves, our own glory, our own power, because that way lies evil and darkness, but live our lives for others, sacrificing everything. That is what it means to take up our cross. It's what Jesus said. And when we do that, the morning breaks. The light fills our lives and our hearts and our world. On this glorious cross, we see the worst of ourselves. In the worst of times, some. But we see the most glorious God. We see that whilst it may be a human thing to make yourself something, it is a godly thing to make yourself nothing. It is a human thing to promote your life. It is a godly thing to give your life. It is a human thing to spend your life for yourself. It is the godly thing to give your life for the world. And as God's people, we are called to go out and draw others to find that extraordinary life that is found in the death of Jesus Christ. To be so confident as his church that this is God who died that we might live, who became like us so that we might be like him, that we will share that news in the way that God came to us, we will go to others. In that way, and that way alone, through history, through the overcoming of the Roman Empire without a sword drawn or a shot fired by the church over 4 centuries, in the overcoming of the Dark Ages through the monasteries of St. Benedict and the retention of human learning and the love of community and the preaching of the good news of the cross, through even the 20th century, the darkest of all history, where in the darkness of the darkest places the light of Christ was still held up. If we live as Jesus lived, if we share what Jesus gave us, if we proclaim the good news of the cross,